All right, so we're diving deep today into these excerpts on worry and negative thinking. Sounds like you're ready to grab those thoughts by the horns and find a little more peace of mind.
For sure. It's something we all deal with. It's kind of wild how much power we unknowingly give to those anxieties, you
It's
know?
like handing them the keys to our brain and saying, "All right, fear, you drive. Take us straight down worry lane."
Exactly.
And speaking of worry, this term negative imagination from the excerpts, I gotta say, that's a new one for me.
It's a powerful concept, though.
Uh-huh.
Like, think of it as basically uh, conjuring up those worst case scenarios in your head,
hmm
but they feel so real, they actually start to, like, control your emotions and actions.
Okay, yeah. One excerpt described it as experiences of fantasy that seem real, and that's resonating with me already. It's like classic childhood fears, you know what I mean? Show a kid one scary movie and boom, every shadow's a monster.
Exactly. And the fear feels totally justified to them because in their mind, fueled by these, vivid images, it's real.
Oh man, calling childhood me out right now. That was my life for a while. Which I guess brings us perfectly to this broader idea of worry itself. The source material defines it as a sustained form of fear caused by indecision. What do you make of that?
Oh, that's a good one. It's like a light bulb moment, right? It highlights how inaction, that feeling of being stuck, is often like the breeding ground for worry. And on the flip side, taking action, even a small step, can be the antidote.
It's like that saying, worrying is as productive as trying to solve an equation by chewing bubble gum. And speaking of things that don't add up, that 96% statistic, that was that was pretty eye-opening.
Yeah, 96% of what we worry about, it either never happens, right? Or it's about something in the past we can't change,
Yeah.
or it's just not that big a deal to begin with. We're talking about like, phantom threats sucking up all our mental energy.
Yeah, and to put it into concrete numbers for those listening, we're talking 40% of those worries never even happen at all. Then you add on another 30% that are about things in the past.
Yeah.
Can't do anything about those, right? And then another 12% that are like health worries that are totally unfounded.
Right.
And then on top of that, another 10% that are just, small potatoes, trivial stuff.
Exactly. Which leaves us with a measly 4% of worries that are actually both legitimate and within our control to, actually do something about.
It makes you wonder, why do we give all that mental real estate to that other 96%? Like, is it hardwired into us, this worry habit, some leftover thing from when we were cave people and had to constantly watch out for danger?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
And, there might be some truth to that we're kind of wired to worry to some extent. But the excerpts you share, they also point out how worry can be, a learned behavior too. Like if you grew up with a parent who was constantly worrying, you might pick up those same patterns without even realizing it.
Inherited anxiety, huh? Didn't know that was in the genes. But it makes sense. And hey, if worry is something we can learn, then we can unlearn it too, right? Which is good because these excerpts are packed with strategies to do just that.
Exactly. And one of the simplest but really powerful ones is this idea of living one day at a time. It's about putting our energy into the things we can actually impact right now,
Yeah.
today, not getting lost in all those what ifs about the future.
Yeah, there's that Teddy Roosevelt quote, do what you can with what you have, where you are. Love that one. You don't need the perfect plan to get started.
Exactly. And that kind of leads into another big one, which is fighting worry with facts. I mean, worry loves to hang out in the unknown, make assumptions, latch onto half-truths, but gathering solid information, that's like pouring water on a fire.
Knowledge is power, or in this case, knowledge is a chill pill.
Right. The more we actually understand, the less we're going to fill in those blanks with fear-based assumptions.
Makes sense.
And, one of the coolest things the excerpts talk about is this thing called the worry destroyer. It's a 4-step process, kind of like a system for dismantling those worries before they, dismantle you.
Okay, break it down for us. Step 1, define it clearly in writing. Sounds simple enough, but I'm guessing there's more to it than meets the eye.
It's kind of surprising how powerful it can be to take those worries that are just swirling around in your head and actually write them down. When they're just up there, it's like they can morph and change and become these big scary monsters.
Trying to grab smoke, right?
Totally. But when we force ourselves to articulate them, to write them down clearly, they often just kind of shrink down to size. Sometimes we even realize that what we thought was this one big worry is actually, a bunch of smaller, more manageable ones all lumped together. The source calls that swarming.
Swarming, I like it. Okay, so step 2 in our worry-busting journey. Determine the worst possible outcome. Wait, isn't that what we're trying to avoid thinking about?
I know, right? Seems counterintuitive. But hear me out. The source material argues that a lot of the time, what causes us distress isn't actually the bad thing happening, but the anticipation of it, the dread. So if we can face that fear head on, imagine that worst case scenario all the way through, it kind of loses its power over us.
Rip off the Band-Aid, get it out in the open.
Exactly, because often that worst case isn't actually as scary or as paralyzing as we've built it up to be in our minds.
Okay, I can see how that would be huge. So we've defined the worry, we've stared down our fear. Now what? Step 3. Accept the worst should it occur. This one feels kind of heavy.
It is. It's about, cultivating true resilience.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean giving up. It's about recognizing that we can't control everything, but we can control how we respond.
What you cannot cure, you must endure. Classic.
Right. And that takes us beautifully to the final step of the worry destroyer, where we take back control. Immediately begin to improve upon the worst.
Acceptance into action. So we've made peace with that worst case scenario, and now we're taking all that anxious energy and doing something constructive with it. Love it.
Yes. And the source even draws this parallel to this concept they use in business, mini-max analysis.
Mini-max.
Yeah, it's about making moves to minimize the maximum potential regret in any situation.
So basically asking yourself, if this bad thing happens, what's the thing I'd most regret not doing, and what can I do right now to prevent that? That's brilliant.
Exactly. It's about knowing that even if things don't work out perfectly, you can at least say you did everything in your power to make things better.
Okay, the worry destroyer, that's a whole masterclass in taking back control. But gotta be honest, this all sounds like, it takes some serious mental discipline.
It does. But the thing is, the most effective tool against worry, even more than any specific technique, is simply shifting from, passively stressing to actively doing.
Action. It's like the magic word, isn't it?
It is, because worry thrives in that state of inaction. But action, it throws a wrench in the whole system. Plus, there's this law of substitution, which says that our brains, we can't really focus on two opposite things at once. So when we choose to act, to fill our minds with, purpose, worry naturally starts to fade into the background.
It's not just about doing something, though, right? It's about doing something meaningful, something that aligns with what we value. Because when we live in line with our values, it hits different.
100%.
Yeah.
And the more we reinforce those positive pathways
Mhm.
with consistent, purposeful action, the less power those old, worry patterns have over us.
Yeah, it's like we're kind of rewiring our brains, proving to ourselves that we're not, powerless against these thoughts.
That's it. And it's interesting, the sources actually tie this whole power of action to a few other laws that, shape how we think. Remember that law of substitution we were talking about?
Yeah.
Well, it's also the law of concentration, which basically says what you focus on grows.
So if we're constantly obsessing over worries, we're just giving them more fuel to, grow bigger and badder. But if we shift that focus to action, to solutions, those are the things that start to take root and expand.
Exactly. Starve the worry, feed the solution. And then there's that whole thing about self-fulfilling prophecies tied to the law of expectation. Like if we're always walking around braced for the worst, chances are we're going to find it, right?
Right.
But if we could be open to positive outcomes, even when things are tough, we might be surprised by what happens.
It all comes back to mindset, doesn't it? Speaking of which, we got to talk about the law of attraction. That one gets a lot of buzz.
It does. And I mean, it sounds kind of simple on the surface, but it's worth thinking about, like tracks right? So if our minds are full of worry and negativity, we're probably going to attract more of that same energy. But if we're actively cultivating positivity, gratitude, that solution-oriented mindset, well, those things have a way of showing up more often too.
It's almost like we have more control over our experiences than we realize. When we choose to act, we're not just changing our circumstances, we're changing our energy, our whole outlook. And that changes everything.
And the big takeaway here isn't about never feeling worry again. I mean, let's be real, that's a tall order. It's more about recognizing when worry isn't serving you anymore, when it's become unproductive, and then choosing a different path, a more empowering one.
It's about remembering we're the ones behind the wheel, and we get to decide where we go from here.
Yeah, exactly. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, but if there's one thing I hope listeners take away, it's that power of action. Big or small, every step towards a goal, every fear you face, every time you choose a more empowering thought, it all adds up to something amazing.
Well said. And on that note of empowering action, let's leave our listeners with a little something to ponder, a final thought provoking question. Remember that mini max strategy we talked about? Minimizing our maximum regret. It's a powerful tool in business, but what if we applied that to our personal lives too?
I would like that.
What if we took some time to really think about our biggest potential regrets and then took action to make them less likely?
Now, that is a question worth sitting with. It's like taking all that worry and turning it into fuel for a more intentional, fulfilling life.
Exactly. And on that note of intentional living, we'll leave you to explore that a bit further. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep taking action.